Passover is my favorite Jewish holiday. I love the rituals, the songs, the harosis and horseradish matzah sandwich. I even love Manischewitz wine. Sorry, Urban, wherever you are. I have wonderful memories of decades of family seders led by my dad. Now, as a child, I would always get impatient during the actual telling of the Exodus story. It always seemed to go on forever, and it was what held us back from dinner. But today, when I reread the Exodus this week, I remembered how much I love the little details of the story. You may not know, for example, that Moses was born 3 months prematurely, and he was delivered by brave midwives who had disobeyed the Pharaoh's orders to kill Jewish boys at the moment of birth. Moses' sister Miriam tricked Pharaoh's daughter into actually hiring Moses' real mother to nurse him. Moses was raised Egyptian, not Jewish, and had no idea he was Jewish until God told him so. And I love how reluctant Moses was to become a leader. When God approaches Moses, Moses actually says to him, according to the text, "Oh my God, please send someone else." It takes God turning a rod into a snake, and then the snake back into a rod, and then God turns Moses' hands leprous, and then God heals the hand, and then God has to turn the water in the river into blood before Moses believes that God is serious about God's request. Now, overall, the Exodus, despite the joy of the Seder, is a pretty bleak story. I remember hearing as a teenager this line: "The story of all Jewish holidays are the same. They tried to kill us. Some of us survived. Let's eat." So when Moses encounters God, the Israelites have been slaves in Egypt for more than 400 years. The Pharaoh, unlike what Devin said, the Pharaoh was a king, the Pharaoh was actually a capricious tyrant who treated the slaves cruelly. The Egyptians, the Bible said, quote, dreaded the Israelites and were ruthless in all they imposed on them. The Jews are suffering mightily during those 400 years. And it gets worse before they leave. God sends multiple plagues to descend on Egypt, which afflict both the Egyptians and the Israelites. God kills all the firstborn sons. Wait a minute. Urban, were you out of the room when I called on you there?
Yes.
Yes. Someone fill him in after. So God kills all the firstborn sons, passing over the homes of the Israelites who have put marks on their doors. All of the Egyptian pursuers drown at the Red Sea. And then the Israelites are forced to spend 40 years wandering in the desert. The story tells us they are hungry and thirsty most of the time, and they are often mad at Moses and each other. And I think most bleak is that according to the story, no one, not even Moses, who left Egypt with their unleavened bread, actually makes it all the way to the promised land. Now, I learned in seminary, much to my dismay, that the Passover story has absolutely no basis in fact. There is no historical record of 600,000 people leaving Egypt, which surely there would have been if 600,000 people left. Nor is there any historical record or scientific explanation for the parting of the Red Sea story Devin told you. So Passover is not a true story, But as I've told you before about other holidays, it is a... No. Yes, but it is a... Anybody? It is a truth story. So these holidays are not true, but they are truth stories. People, as we know, have been oppressed by tyrannical leaders for thousands of years. Aren't we witnessing that truth today? Ever since the Babylonian exile, the Jewish people have been hated, reviled, persecuted, and even murdered because of our culture and our ethnicity. Never again is not a slogan to Jews. It is a prayer of hope that the millennial-old campaigns to kill us would never occur again after the Holocaust. I am 97% Ashkenazi Jewish. Can I ask those of you who are also predominantly Ashkenazi Jewish to raise your hands? So we have quite a few people who come from this background. That means in my case that my great-great-grandparents were indentured slaves in Eastern Europe. My great-grandparents were driven out of their villages in Poland and Ukraine. My grandmother Anna's 4 sisters and her mothers were murdered by the Nazis. I grew up in Fairfield County, Connecticut, not dissimilar in many ways to Newton, where Jews were not allowed to live in certain of the towns, nor were we allowed to become members at country clubs. When I was in the 2nd grade, I was literally held down and had hot tar poured down my back by older boys shouting anti-Semitic slogans. During my interview for Princeton, the interviewer said to me, "We don't take many of your kind." I asked if he meant women. He pointedly said no. I learned when I was 8 years old that people hated Jews so much that they murdered us. I was at my grandma's and she had her friend Susan over for tea, and I saw the numbers tattooed on Susan's arm. When I asked what they were, my grandmother shushed me. Those of us who are American Ashkenazi Jews carry epigenetic terror in our DNA. Joe Kent Katz, a historian, defines this terror as, quote, "the fear of the unpredictable rise and fall of attempted annihilation and expulsion derived from repeated periods of mass anti-Jewish violence in Christian Europe, transmitted as intergenerational trauma, triggered by overt and covert anti-Jewish rhetoric and present-day violence." I shook for days after the Hamas massacre and kidnapping in October 2023. Rabbi Torzab Firestone writes, "For many Jews, catastrophe remains an unconscious organizing principle, a representation of reality that is passed from generation to generation." She goes on, and I love this line, "Jews have had a proverbial backpack for hundreds of years." Jews have a proverbial backpack packed for hundreds of years, always ready for the next expulsion, always anticipating the next crisis. I want you to know, those of you who are not from Jewish backgrounds, that many of us are experiencing that intergenerational trauma right now. We watch Elon Musk perform Nazi salutes. We read that 1 in 3 American Jews experienced anti-Semitism in the past year, that 1 in 5 Gen Zers do not believe the Holocaust actually happened. Anti-Semitism has always existed in the United States, but in the past 2 years it has grown exponentially. So, at the same time, have instances of Islamophobia. Hatred of Muslims and Jews have been intertwined since the Crusade and the Inquisition. And despite the administration's claim about anti-Semitism being their reason for college campus crackdowns, we know that Christian nationalists are not friends of the Jewish people. According to Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, quote, anti-Semitism and false theories of Jewish power are in the DNA of the alt-right white nationalist movement in all its various flavors, offshoots, and precursors. Whether you are Jewish or not, there is no defeating the right without attacking anti-Semitism. I think you know that Israel was founded in 1948, but you may not know it was founded to solve Europe's, quote, Jewish problem. The continued cycle of hatred against us throughout history is why over 8 in 10 American Jews support the state of Israel, a Jewish homeland that is self-governed and where all Jews are welcome to immigrate. And please know that supporting the idea of a state of Israel is different than supporting its current right-wing government and its actions in Gaza and the West Bank. I want to be clear that I support what Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis calls a both-and love. I condemn Hamas. I abhor the right-wing government of Benjamin Netanyahu and the murder of tens of thousands of people in Gaza. Gaza needs humanitarian assistance now. Our May Share the Plate will go to the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund to support the children who have suffered. The remaining Israeli hostages and the bodies of those who died need to be returned now. There must be a permanent ceasefire now. Israelis and Palestinians deserve to live in peace, and both deserve homelands where they can flourish. As I've been saying to you since I met you last spring, there is only one side: humanity. The point for today is that the Passover story continues on loop for the Jewish people and for so many others up till today. It is a story for people around the world who are in bondage to cruel leaders. There have always been tyrants in power, those who enslave, betray, and harm others, especially those who are easily labeled other. Attacks today in the United States against refugees, Latinx people, transgender people have the same playbook as anti-Semitism. First, working to develop antagonism against a minority group, trying to isolate them, and then working to deny their rights. Now, on a much less global scale, Passover is also a truth story about each of our lives. Is there anyone who has not experienced what it feels like to be in the wilderness or in bondage? Is there anyone among us who hasn't experienced betrayals and denials? Haven't we all experienced losses and not knowing what our next steps are? Relationship loss, job loss, addictions, financial loss, illnesses. Have you ever felt like you were in the wilderness, feeling abandoned with no end in sight? Me too. But there's also a promise in these truth stories, that there is liberation from what binds us, freedom from our own Egypts, the assurance that we will reach a promised land, that we can be saved, stronger, and ready to take on new life. The Passover story, today's Palm Sunday story, and this next week's Holy Week story are all about rising to the best of oneself, even when we don't think we can. They are stories of taking chances, of being courageous, without knowing how the story is going to end or whether things are going to work out. They are stories of faith against the odds. Can you imagine the faith needed to leave your home so quickly that the bread didn't have time to rise? Our shared truth story together is that love is both unbearably difficult and unbearably lovely. We live in that wilderness, and we live at the edge of the promised land. Our lives are a promise of new beginnings over and over again. Even when we are beset by the worst plagues and the worst circumstances, we can still look for hope together. The Seder will begin tonight with these words. Let us sit at the table of abundance, drink the wine of freedom, eat the bread of freedom. Freedom from bondage and freedom from oppression. Freedom from hunger and freedom from want. Freedom from hatred and freedom from fear. Freedom to think and freedom to speak. Freedom to teach and freedom to learn. Freedom to pray and freedom to not pray. Freedom to hope and freedom to rejoice. We give thanks for the liberation of days gone by. My friends, may we hope and pray and work together for liberation in our days.